All right, welcome back to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast. We're talking PGA Tuesday night. I'm here as usual with Colin and Pete, who held down the fort for me last week when I was out. But the trio is back, guys. What's going on?
Bonjour, guten tag, top of the morning, guys. Why am I talking in such a silly language this whole time? Anybody have any guesses?
Wow. Yeah. So this Christmas time for Colin. This is the PGA podcast, but I guess it's more aptly should be called just the Daily Fantasy Golf Flex podcast because, some exciting news.
There's a Euro slate. DK did a Euro slate. Oh my God, you guys, I'm so excited. There's a lot of reasons why I'm excited, but mostly it's because I think there's going to be a huge edge for FantasyLabs customers here. If you're listening to those podcasts regularly, you know my objections with all things strokes gained, and one of the linchpins is Euro guys don't have it. And for everybody who's been kind of relying on stuff for shot link type data, they're going to be at a huge disadvantage if they don't know how to basically squeeze blood out of a stone with conventional stats and have good stuff like adjusted round from cross tours and stuff like that. I think our tools are going to give a huge edge for the new slates. I can't wait to talk about them long term. I think people are going to be going off of name recognition alone when they pick their lineups, and there's just a huge amount of opportunity for a data-driven angle. Pete, what was your reaction when you found out there's a Euro slate? Are you I'm going to have to wake up at 6 a.m. to start watching the tour over there now? Or what's your plan going forward?
I'm just going to follow Colin. I mean, you're going to be the expert. We have the great tools, and of course I'm going to play. I'm going to play a bunch, and it'll be great. I mean, it's just I'm ecstatic. I mean, loving golf already, and the summer we're winding down here, the NBA playoffs, so it's just great to have something else to follow and keep track of. And I certainly think we'll have much more of an edge with FantasyLabs than even the PGA Tour. Obviously, I think there's a lot of value in the tools for PGA, but obviously there's different approaches, and there is a shot link data out there for most of the PGA tournaments or all the PGA tournaments. And now with the European Tour, we have I think we have the best process. So I'm ecstatic about it, and I'm excited to watch Euro golf grow.
Yep, I'm really excited for our users. I think they're going to have a really great time with these tools.
Yeah, for sure. So some quick show notes, I guess sort of about the Euro Tour. We are going to talk about it. We're going to address it. We're not going to ignore it. We already have data in models and trends. So if you want to use that for the BMW Championship, which is in Sweden this week, that DraftKings has up for GPPs and whatever contest you'd like to play, go to our sites, go to the models and trends. Go ahead and use them already. We're going to touch on it briefly here. We will add it to our podcast that you're listening to currently and that we do every Tuesday night. This podcast, we will add a Euro-specific segment. It'll be abbreviated this week, but we will be more full-fledged starting next week. We'll also have some written content. Our Plays of the Week series that we have for PGA, we are going to adapt for Euro. So point of the story is we're gonna take care of you guys. We're gonna make sure that you guys get all the content and all the data and all the stuff that you need to be prepared every week for Euro. Very excited. Before we get to the PGA, which is the DEAN DELUCA Invitational in Texas, let's sort of just, Colin, I know you want to give some thoughts on Euro Tour since you're so excited and for Euro and I guess this tournament as well. So give us some quick thoughts in abbreviated form, and we can expand more and do a more broad thing next week.
Yeah, so the quick rundown on the course this week is at Wentworth, and just I guess I'll do the abbreviated version of our normal rundown. Wentworth looks like it's playing out as a ball strikers course. High accurate. I think you're going to get a lot more. I got to look more into this as far as what the courses are like on the Euro Tour, but I think they lean more heavily ball striking and link style and accuracy is more valued. This is no exception. You're going to want ball strikers over long hitters. I think the quick notes for narratives of interest. Shane Lowry has by far the best course history here. If you're a believer in that thing. That's a half plug for my own article because I'm going to be doing a long multi-part series in course history, Pete. I'm sure you're going to be reading those ones, and I'll lay out what I've discovered from my process this week. That's an aside. Mm-hmm. Shane Lowry easily has the best course history. I think Danny Willett and Russell Knox are slightly overvalued. They're good, but I think they're going to be coasting both off of name recognition and high prices. Bradley Dredge is the guy that I've been waiting to play all year. I thought I'd have to wait until the British Open, but he's definitely popping really high. And almost disappointingly, David Lingworth rates as one of the best values on the board. I think people are going to be picking him a lot just because of name recognition alone on this slate. I was kind of hoping to be a landmine, but he actually rates out pretty high. I have a lot more opinions, but I think we're going to figure out a way to give this a much more formal rundown, but I didn't want to leave our listeners hanging with absolutely nothing. Any questions from you guys? Anyone you're wondering about specifically?
No questions for me at this point. I've just done research on the PGA, but I'm going to be listening to all your stuff, and I know we'll have some more things on the Euro Tour. So I need to really research it and digest it. But what you said just makes sense. And Lowry, I'm definitely excited to read your course history stuff because I feel like my biggest mistake by far last week was taking Keegan Bradley. So. We'll discuss that, and
yeah, we'll discuss mistakes and what we learned and all that stuff because I've been thinking about them too. But yeah, just got to leave you guys something. What all else equal, pick ball strikers this week.
Yeah, good call on that. And I will say that it's going to be important. PGA DFS is sort of unique in that, like for our player models, you can have a player model for MLB or NBA or NFL or whatever, and you sort of create your model one time when you sort of subscribe to FantasyLabs or whenever you do it, and you can use it on every slate. You can have how you value quarterbacks or how you want to rate NBA players, and that's going to just sort of be your model for all time. PGA DFS is a little bit different in that as the course changes, you sort of have to you change your model to rate the guys differently and weight certain things differently. So your models have to change on a weekly basis as opposed to just being a static thing. So it's going to make it interesting because you're obviously going to have two different models, potentially one for your PGA Tour, one for your Euro Tour. So that's going to be interesting, but we will do our best to help you sort of walk through how to do that and the differences between the courses and how to set up your two models. So it's going to be a challenge, but I think a worthwhile and fun one for us. All right, let's move to our regular segments of the podcast. And as usual, we'll start what we learned. I was out. You guys broke down last week's tournament, and I didn't get a chance to play. So I'll let you guys take over this. Pete, I'll start with you. Anything you learned?
Well, I already knew it, and I somehow went against what I've said all along. And my good friend Birdwings has said he'll never play Keegan Bradley again. I've said it, and then I went back to the well, played him in cash, played him a ton of tournaments, and watched him miss 6 straight birdie putts. Some of the quotes from the announcers where I've never seen such bad posture, with wide guy putting. Every time he putts, it looks like someone kicked his dog. Just all sorts of stuff. I mean, he's just completely lost it. And ever since he went away from the anchored putter, the Jordan signing, whatever you want to blame it, I definitely think it's going away from the anchored putter. But that in correlation with everything else, he has zero confidence on the greens. And even on those greens where it was, it favored guys who weren't great putters relative to other fields. And Keegan was just an absolute joke. He was just straight, just smoking drives down the middle of the fairway, putting it close, and then just getting crushed. So
being Keegan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason why Keegan was such like a seductive pick, I guess, last week is because of that course history. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot to talk about course history. We're going to talk about it a bunch over the next 4 weeks in the articles. But it's just tough when you see some of those eye-popping numbers. But look at how well he's done. And as many general rules you can say that world course history does help in that case, it still is results from 3, 4, 5 years ago, and it's not built to catch people who have abrupt changes. I think something like Keegan Bradley moving away from a belly putter is one of those abrupt changes that a general rule will not catch by definition, and that's something where I think it requires a little bit of subjective knowledge of he has great past numbers, but the anchor putter is gone. That's enough of an instantaneous change where your generic rules might not catch some of that things. And that's why course history is always it's a tricky one. I think there's a lot of edge cases there where you can kind of get wonky results. And unless you know how to handle those and where those landmines are, it's you can come up with one-size-fits-all rules, but I guess it remains to be seen on whether or not they hurt you or help you more if you don't know when to fade those multipliers. Those are my thoughts on Keegan Bradley. The other thing I thought about this week, and this is kind of an idle thought, is one thing we haven't talked a lot about is scoring environment. And by that, I mean, the winner was like, 18? It's always been 18 under, like, this tournament. You compare that to something like, Torrey Pines, where the winner can be 7 under. The Masters is like 2 under or something like that. I wonder if there's a hypothetical case where if you're building a cash lineup, the assumption is always get as many guys over the cut and trade upside. Could you theoretically have a low enough scoring environment where you want to chase finishing points instead of something like birdies? Because in a high scoring environment, birdies are going to be plentiful and finishing points will have their value diluted. But in a low scoring environment, maybe finishing points are worth more. I say that as a complete theoretical because in reality, I think it's really tough to predict who's going to win finishing points. It's so volatile at the top that, like, if you had a really good beat on who's going to win, you probably just want to pick them anyway, even a high scoring environment. But it's not something we've talked explicitly. It's something I'm idly wondering. I probably won't pursue it in a whole lot of seriousness, but I still want to get your guys' thoughts about, like, where does a theoretical kind of break from the practical?
I definitely think that's applicable, and it's taking the right guys too, and understanding what courses fit, the type of players you want. I mean, when there's a ton of birdies out there, obviously, the best golfers are going to make more birdies in general, but there's certain guys who in those conditions seem to just string together those 3 birdie streaks too. I definitely think there's some guys who get really hot in the course, and I want to do some more research because one thing that I'm noticing that does make a difference, especially in tournaments at the end, is those 3 birdie streaks. And, capturing those, I think, is really critical. And certainly your talk of trading upside for floor is very important, too, deciphering what type of course it is and stuff.
Yeah, I think, in order to put that to an actionable decision process, I think there's a lot more, like, if-thens that need to get worked out. I don't know how much of an edge it is relative to just, like, pick your best golfers type of thing. Maybe it matters more in, like, the higher stakes tournaments where you need to scrape for edge, but I think it's an angle. I just figured, and we never talked about it before.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, we mentioned this briefly, like we haven't really yet dive into it, but of course that there's a lot of birdies out there. Do you go for guys who can make cuts because it's almost sort of like possessions in NBA DFS? You just want a team with a whole lot of possessions. You don't necessarily care about efficiency, but then if you have a slate where teams aren't really fast paced, and all of a sudden efficiency becomes a lot more important. So I think that there is some applicability to it, but you're right. It's sort of hard to figure out where that line is. Is it Augusta, where they play even, or is it a course that's -4 or 5 on average? I guess we would have to sort of look more into depth on exactly where that line is. But I do think there's merit to looking into that and actually questioning, how does it change game theory and strategy for tournaments? And
the US Open's coming up. It's going to be low scores. So, like, I figured might as well try to figure this one out before the next major.
Yeah, good call. All right, let's move into our tournament this week, which is the DEAN DELUCA Invitational. I'll quickly give some course history, past winners. Chris Kirk won last year at -12. The year before that was Adam Scott at -9. Boo Weekley -14. Zach Johnson won his in 2012 for the second time at -12, and David Toms the year before that at -15. Again, DEAN DELUCA Invitational. It takes place at Colonial, means Colonial Country Club, which is in Fort Worth, Texas. Quickly, weather as of right now looks like it's going to rain Thursday and Friday, which could potentially be problematic. But again, that is something that we'll have to monitor as we get closer to the tournament. So before we get into our questions and then player tiers, let's quickly hit on course history for this tournament. Colin, my initial thoughts were that this is going to be a ball striker course as well, sort of like our Euro Tour this week. Is that what your analysis has shown?
Yep, top 2 by far are driving accuracy and GIR, almost to the point where big hitters get a slight penalty as well. So it's nice to have that synergy when they release both slates, ball strikers across the board. But I'd agree with that. It's all DA, or driving accuracy, and GIR.
I like it. Easy enough. All right. Well, let's hit on our two questions that we usually address. I come up with two questions and ask you guys, and then we'll hit our player tiers and keep this train running. So the first question I have for you guys, this tournament, the DEAN DELUCA Invitational, is one of 5 invitational tournaments on tour. That means that you have to meet some sort of criteria in order to qualify. So I guess my question broadly, and this is maybe sort of hard to quantify. Does that affect us in DFS at all?
I get maybe from a confidence angle. I don't know. I'll toss that one to Pete. But like, I think the extrapolated argument you could make is if you're invited only, does that mean essentially there's a bias of some sort in the player field, either in terms of overall stats or key stats or something like that? I don't think it necessarily affects our decisions, because even if there is kind of a bias, we should be able to pick that out from the data alone, where you can, like, if it's either like past good winners or maybe they have a type, like I don't think it really affects I can't find a way that affects our process.
Yeah, I just wonder if it meant that there was a stronger field in general relative to other fields. I mean, obviously a major, you're going to have a strong field, but obviously just an invitational sort of suggests that you're going to have a stronger field for that particular field relative to other ones, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely fair. And that's kind of the more generic question of what do you do with a strong field versus a weak field, if anything. I think that's still an open question, actually. Like, I think there's a case for not doing anything, and just like, because it's such an individual game that like maybe your cut lines are like different at the margins, but it's still such a high variance sport that you're fine focusing on individual golfers essentially, and none of that like covariance type of stuff.
Pete, any thoughts on that?
I tend to agree with Colin. I think we should be able to pick it out anyways. What might stand out for us in DFS and what we should be targeting. So it's an interesting question. I just think that we should be able to find it in the data anyways.
Makes sense. And then my second question, I sort of try to gear these around something specific to each week. And another sort of interesting thing about this tournament is the longest held non-major on tour. This is its 70th year, which is sort of interesting. So, we talked a lot in Masters Week with Augusta, just how much, data we have on Augusta and the course and in the tournament in general, and how that sort of changed how we approach course history. Maybe it's a situation where we weight it heavier than other weeks because we're more confident in the data. It's not just where we have 3 or 4 years of data or some of these tours rotate sites every year. So this isn't a major, but it's something where we have confidence in our data. So Colin, I guess I'll kick to you. How does that affect your analysis this week?
I probably would have given you a different answer maybe 3 weeks ago, but in kind of looking into course history, I'm becoming increasingly convinced that, and this is in the article today, that a rolling 5-year window is probably going to help course fit and course history better than taking 70 years back. The thing that bit me last week, not even bit me because I reran it just fine, was last week's course had a major redesign in 2008, so that basically invalidated everything before that, made it too noisy. I think even if courses don't have redesigns, like explicitly major overhauls, they're tinkering enough at the margins. Remember the whole tiger proofing craze back in the day? You can still alter courses depending on what you want to do, and that kind of changes stuff like course fit and course history to some degree. So it's great that they've had it for 70 years, but I don't think even the layman would say it's been the exact same course for 70 years. It's undergone some changes. Mm-hmm. I think the better question is, when do those changes occur, and can you pick that up in the data? When is this course not the same course as it was before? When is Colonial not Colonial? Or it's like, when is Colonial V5 different like Colonial V4? And can you mark the spot of transition? Pete, do you have any thoughts on visibility into macro changes in the tour in general? When that might correlate when courses have good turnover in their composition?
Yeah, I mean, I think you talked about when they start tiger proofing course, making them longer. That's something to pay attention to. I think the most critical thing to pay attention to overall is any changes they might have made to greens. That can really change things because some of these guys put really well on different types of grasses, and I think that there can be confidence that players have based on certain greens. If that's taken away, it definitely changes things. So, that was evident last week. And I do think one thing I'm still, curious to learn more about is just how much more valuable is recent course history? Which windows should you take? And you kind of alluded to it with the 5-year window, but I definitely think it's more and more important. It's funny. Even coming from the subjective side, I think data is obviously critical, but understanding this course history, which I think we can test, but there still might be some subjective stuff we have to kind of price in, like guys being members at a course afterwards or whatever it is. And then in addition to that, some of these subjective things I'm really starting to weight more, especially the subjective things where it's like, okay, guy clearly lost his confidence because of X, Y, or Z. And that's something I hope to continue to get better at, because there's definitely guys who know the tour a lot better than me, and I'm striving to really know it a lot better. So long-winded answer, but a lot of things that I'm trying to get better at, and hopefully we can deliver better information to everybody.
Quick follow-up on that before we move to players, which I guess we can sort of segue, my question into the players, because it's about players. And, we've seen in other sports, NBA, where we've had sort of a explosion of advanced analytics. And we know, especially with the Golden State Warriors playing right now, how sort of they've changed the NBA and how we analyze the NBA with not only with corner threes, but just sort of offenses in general. And do you guys think that we're going to have some sort of data renaissance where players are just getting different? We even have talked about this with Bryson, where he is approaching the game differently. So do you think maybe course history and course fit is going to change as golfers just get more analytical and probably just get better as the game evolves?
Yeah, I think their data is always going to help in something. I'm always curious as far as how exactly will it manifest itself. Even just Augusta's still fresh in my mind. Danny Willett subscribed to 15th Club, who's getting run by this guy Jake Nichols, whose work I've used and I respect a lot, incorporate a lot into the models here. But yeah, what is it? It's almost like, what is the macro variable? Like if you have has intelligence or something like that as a binary for every single one of these guys, does course fit hold a little bit less? Are they going to be playing more to their natural abilities or have better strategies? I think I almost think that if guys have better information and better strategy, maybe course fit matters even less, because yes, at some point it runs up to all right, I have all the intelligence to say that I should be able, if I hit it 330 in my drives, that's better. But if you don't have the power, you don't have the power. But maybe something like driving accuracy, greens and regulation, could intelligence be a substitute for some of those accuracy type of things? Or do you have to practice accuracy? I was kind of wondering the same thing about course history and course fit, or is knowledge of the greens ever a substitute for a physical skill? And if it can be, what can you sub in for? What physical skills can you proxy for with course knowledge? And which ones are you just kind of stuck saying all right, I can't bomb it, I'm screwed.
Just real quic. I mean, I know we're going long-winded here on some of this stuff, but Augusta, the greens, clearly there's something there. Some of these guys just putt much better. Spieth is a classic example, and there's other guys who just have a ton of history where clearly the course knowledge matters a ton. And that's the thing, that just all of this is really dynamic. I guess that's my overall kind of conclusion where I'm at now, is there's just so many, everything's dynamic, and you just have to continue to try to gain these small edges, because there's a lot of these small edges out there, and it really isn't a one-size-fit-all, or this is the strategy week in, week out. Everything is always changing, and these players are changing. And last thing, just on what's happening with players in terms of the renaissance, everyone's getting longer. And there's clubs that are getting longer too for players, which really is changing things as well. Like Jason Day is hitting a 2-iron, 290, 300 yards. That's incredible. There's just different things happening now that's changing the game. But I think in general, one thing I'm taking away is I'm going to try to get exposure to these guys who can hit it really far most weeks. It's an exception, but take them. I mean, they can hit these other clubs that they can hit sky high, super far. I mean, Jason Day can hit his 2-iron pretty high. It's a huge advantage to be able to hit the ball super far and high. And courses, we'll continue to see guys just get better and better at golf. That's just what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, and Colin's article, his first one on course history, came out today. So go check that on the site if you have not read it yet. And I think this will be a subject that we continually debate and talk about in future podcasts, along with our new segment on the Euro Tour. All right, well, let's move into our players. We sort of went long on those, but I think they were good discussions and things we needed to have. But we'll talk players now. We divide our players into 3 tiers. The top tier, as we define it, is 9,000 on DraftKings or more. The middle tier is 7 to 8.9, and then 6.9 thousand or less is sort of the value tier. And we'll sort of run through these. Who wants to go first this week? We'll start with
Pete. I think you're up because we're switching off every week.
Okay. So first guy, let's talk about Jordan Spieth, who's the top guy. The eye test last week, he looked pretty good the first couple of days, was kind of scrapping some things together, and he keeps talking about he's not feeling great over the ball. And that really, he fell apart completely on Sunday, but there's a lot of evidence on that on Saturday. He really couldn't hit his drives. He was bailing out on all his drives. It was the same miss. He was missing everything right. And he even said he's had no confidence over the golf ball. So I think a lot of people heard that. I think a lot of people saw him blow up on Sunday. So for me, Spieth is an elite GPP play this week. I'm going to be on him in tournaments, but I'm not going to touch him in cash. Too many red flags, too expensive. There's guys I like more. Guy I like the most in the top range, Kuchar, ball striker. I mean, I saw a stat on this week. Kuchar has more top 10s than anyone, I think, since 2010 on tour, more than any single player in all the old PGA Tour. And he's a perfect cash game play. A ball striker for sure. Makes just a ton of cuts. And, at 11K, I think he's clearly the top option. Adam Scott's still doing well in my models, which is interesting because he definitely has the length. But he is a great ball striker as well. That's the thing about Adam Scott is he's an elite iron player. Always had one of the best swings on tour. Always been a great ball striker. It's really hurt him over the last couple of years, been the putting. He got hot in that Florida stretch earlier when he won 2 tournaments. I don't know what to think about his putting. He's another guy who had to go away from the anchor putter, so it's hard to gauge. Sometimes it looks like he has it. Sometimes it looks like he's completely lost it. So it's tough to say. The one thing I will say, Colin, that I think is beneficial for both you guys, one thing I've noticed with Scott, some weeks he really struggles with his lag putts. I think struggling with your lag putts is a much more objective thing to measure than just how many putts someone's making. Lag putts, they're trying to get in a 3-foot circle. That seems like a much more repeatable skill. And you'll see, the best putters always do that, always 2-putt. And that's something that Scott struggled with in certain situations. So I'm a little hesitant on him, but I think he's a great tournament play. And that's really all I'm kind of looking at in the top tier. I think Kuchar is going to be on a lot of my lineups. But the other 2 interesting cases for sure, which merit a lot of tournament exposure, are Scott and Spieth.
Maybe lag putts is a variable for your.
Is Zach Johnson over 9K? He's the other lock. Sorry. I meant Zach Johnson's same class as Kuchar. Love him. I meant to talk about him. He's one of my favorite plays this week as well. Talk about ball striking. He's elite. One thing he lacks to be like one of the best players on tour is distance. Par 5s. He's constantly getting there in 3 and really counting on his wedge game to make birdies. Now it's a ball striker's course. I mean, this sets up really well for him, and I'm sure he'll be very popular this week.
I agree with your top line thing. I mean, Spieth is I think the other ones of the big 3, like Rory had a much more impressive showing at the Irish Open. He's the one that could justify that kind of price with the way that him and Jason Day are playing now. So yeah, like GPP is fine, especially if you think his ownership is bad. Like that's a great GPP play. I agree with, Kuchar and Scott are like kind of like equally from a data end kind of on my level. Zach Johnson is the one that he's not popping as high. And like, there are a couple different reasons that are kind of worth talking about. One is the recent results aren't great. He had a 68 last week. He didn't have a great showing, like not elite. So I kind of have his overall long-term adjusted around, especially recently, not necessarily on the level as those other guys like Kuchar and Scott. The other reason that you would consider him is our favorite subject, which is course history. And I think so this is where I openly wonder about the 5-year window. So his course history in the last 5 years, so from 11 to 15, it's 4, 1, 3, 73, and 19. And then right behind it in 10, it's a 1, and then 09, it's a 9. So there are a couple open questions here. Do you do a time weighting of course history? Do you rate recent ones slightly more? And then, like, with your one-size-fits-all, at Colonial, would you be justified in maybe going beyond your standard 5-year window? Could you do a 6? Could you do a 7? I don't necessarily know the answers to those questions, but depending on, like, what you believe, I think that will influence whether or not you like Zach Johnson, because you basically have to believe in course history here either more than your standard rules, or truly believe he has elite course history in order to get him up to Kuchar's level, in my opinion. So it's kind of unresolved, I think, right? We don't have this, like, concretely solved. Pete, do you think there's a reason we could expand from 5 to 7 for this particular course?
Sure, I do like seeing it. Yeah. I like seeing the history just back even farther. I mean, that can't be bad. There's no massive change in that time window that would make me think otherwise. And certainly, guys, one thing I want to mention too, we love feedback. I've made mistakes on these things. Everyone does. Please give us the feedback. We want to get better. So if you know something that we want to hear that. So definitely let us know. But to my knowledge, there's no big change. So I love seeing that. I mean, I think I like him a lot. I think he'll be really popular. I am tending to weight course history more than you are probably, Colin, at this point. Even though I made a mistake last week with Keegan Bradley, maybe even Lucas Glover, which I talked a little bit about just because of his price. But I'm still going to be on that bandwagon, and the main reason I'm convinced that's right is because some of the guys I think are the best at PGA DFS, they have a ton of course history baked into their stuff from the lineups I see.
Yeah, I mean, that's always like I struggle with like getting the rules right. It's such a noisy, outliery, like edge case type of thing that, like, it doesn't do well for one-size-fits-all rules. I think figuring out those cases is really important. So I don't know. That's going to be one thing I have to look at. Like, do I expand my window this week from 5 to 7? Are there any major changes? Like, is it lead enough? But I could see, like, right now Zach Johnson isn't popping higher, but I could easily see that as being the model setup or the model's fault, and not, like, maybe I'm not weighting course history enough. Other guys, because we've talked about a bunch now. The other two guys that are kind of, I see probably making my way into more lineups are probably Patrick Reed and Kevin Chappell. Reed, I think, is just a little bit too cheap at 10K. He has decent. It's only 2 courses, 2 logs here so far. He's made the cut both times. It's not great course history. I think Kevin Chappell also probably has.
He is hot. Chappell is smoking hot, dude. How much do you weight that? How much?
I mean, recent form is recent form. I mean, it's its own slider for a reason. I definitely believe in it, and yeah, his recent results are off the charts right now. I'd
say that. Yeah.
Yeah,
dude, he's been there like every week, and it's just like unbelievable. And that's another super small subjective thing that I'm not sure if I can just definitely say this is why, but he talked about how he used to get way too angry on the course, and he just couldn't let mistakes. He couldn't get over them, which is critical. I mean, if anyone plays golf, I mean, I know if you're tilting after missing an easy par or missing a birdie putt. I can't tell you how many times I've missed a putt that I should have made, and then the next tee shot I just botch. You're just not focused. You're down. You don't have that right energy. And the same thing goes, which is why I was talking about the birdie streaks. When you make a putt and you get the momentum, that's why some of these guys can really string it together. Like, you see Rory in particular. When Rory gets hot, he just throws together birdies like crazy. And you can see it with the way he walks. I know it's probably making you throw up over there, Colin, but
keeping it in.
Yeah, it's. With Chappell, going back to Chappell, he talked about how he's really changed his mentality, and I've seen it. I've watched and seen that he really does have a different mental approach. His caddies talked about it. Everyone has, and since he talked about it, I mean, the results have been astounding. Now, I'm not going to say that's like this massive thing, but it's just something I've noticed. So I'm tending to want to fire on him, especially in GPPs. I'm just curious how owned he'll be, given how great his recent form's been. But I still don't think he's like the name that a lot of these other guys are, because he hasn't won.
No, definitely not. I think he's still like the household name factor, maybe not like as much. I think I mean, we can speculate on ownership later, but like decently low. But I see him getting into, I mean, just like, I think I'm picking up his recent form enough, and it's kind of coming out that way combined with course history. And like, yeah, I think they're probably like my favorite over like nexus of value to price in that range. I could see both of them getting in some cash game lineups.
Patrick Reed's going to win in the next 10 events. If there's a way I feel like he is, the do factor is a terrible, like literally the worst thing you can possibly say. I don't believe in that at all in any sport. Not into that, but just I think Patrick Reed's playing well, and if you take the odds to win over the next 10 tournaments, I think he gets it done.
Cool. Yeah, Chappell has been hot. He's got 4 top 9 finishes in his last 6 events. Not bad. Yeah, but you're right. He 2 of those were second place finishes, so he just hasn't got that first place finish that sort of makes him a popular play. So yeah. So quickly, I'd like to get you guys fade in this top tier, because these top tier guys are the ones that everyone sort of wants to hear about. I assume, Colin, yours is going to be the past winner, but are you going someone else?
I mean, Chris Kirk is. He also, I think, has like in the 5-year window, still probably does have the best course history of the bunch. So I could actually see him being like, depending on how much you weight it, like still he good. Could be like. I mean, there's an argument between him and Chappell as far as like which one you rate higher. Okay. Yeah, the fade probably is going to be. I might lean someone like Oosthuizen. There's been nothing in his set of results. I think I've been bearish on him pretty much all year, and that probably continues this week. I mean, I don't think he had a pretty poor showing last week, didn't he? What was it? Missed the cut last week. I've never liked his long term. I think he's still just easy fade for me.
Cool. Pete, you got to fade.
I talked about how I like him in tournaments, but I'm fading Spieth hard in cash.
Yeah. I agree with that, like standard. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the easy fade. And Louis, I don't love either. One game I play that originally we started over on Roto Grinders, and that's low ball. That's a game we might start having to play here, where basically you have to spend all the salary, but 500. You can leave 500 on the table or less. But your goal is to make the worst team. And the rules that we've made to because basically what ends up happening is people take Spieth and Rory and the most expensive guys and then the 4 worst players. So what we've kind of done to eliminate that is, eliminate the top tier guys, whatever price you want to choose for the week, and then some low tier guys, like has to be golfers over 6,500 and no one over 11,000. It's a really interesting game. So that, who's the chalk low ball play this week? It might be Louis.
Yeah, you could do it by like a guy has to have implied odds of a certain percent or something. Yeah, that's
there's so many ways you can do it, but it is really interesting, especially in golf, trying to make it. And I can't tell you how many times, especially in the last month, where my low ball team has been my best team, which is just absolutely
added insult to injury. Yeah.
It's just adding a ton of insult to injury. So yeah, take that for what it's worth. Low ball's a great game and a lot of fun.
Interesting. My fade, I think, is going to be Hoffman, by the way. I think he has been playing really well lately, so I think his ownership is going to be higher than I want in a terrible course fit. So if anyone cares. All right, let's
it's a good pick. Yep.
Let's move on to our next tier, which is going to be 7 to 8, 9. And Colin, you're up for the first go.
All right, who's at the top of the mid-tier range? This is like number 1 with a bullet, and it's slightly tilting as Ryan Palmer, because we were all so excited about him last week. He was the lock. He was the nuts. I didn't even think twice about it. And complete with a water ending on 18 to just ruin everybody.
He's done that to me twice. Twice Ryan Palmer has. He's just never ends well with Ryan Palmer, but I'm still going to
Yeah, I know. So, he was, 8,900 last week. I don't think a single miscut is enough to drop you to 8,100, like where he's at now. I think that's still a little bit too cheap. He doesn't have the course history like he did last week, but he missed it last year, but after that, a 5, a 14, a 5, a 31. It's not bad. It's better than, most of the rest of the field. I still think 8,100 is just a little bit too cheap for some of the stuff, and, it's in the mid-tier. I kind of like it a lot. So, and then outside of that, who else is here? Colt Knost is someone that, I think he's growing in popularity.
We talked about him, but he was the nuts last week.
Yeah.
After rerunning some stuff, I redid my models. That's one other thing that I highly recommend to anyone is, and some guys have asked for this on Twitter as well, go back and rerun the models, and compare them to the results. I mean, I'm not saying you should say, okay, it was a great pick just because it lines up exactly with the results, but it is something that's interesting to do. And some more models I made, Knost was popping so high. And I feel like I missed on him. And also, just to add to the flavor, sorry to interject so many.
You're good.
But Nost is a guy who gambles on everything. Just throwing that out there.
Perfect.
He's known as like the degen on tour, kicks Phil Mickelson's ass. Like this guy is a big dude, jolly. I mean, I love the guy. He also had great things to say about Bryson DeChambeau, which again, I've been.
Now I'm talking about, all right, Pete, you're good. No, your topic is over.
He critiqued him. He critiqued a big thing, which I agree with. He talked about how it's going to be really hard to have a good short game using a 6-iron length as your lob wedge. So, done. Colin,
good guy, good. Like, I don't want to hear that's Voldemort stuff. I don't want to hear his name ever again. All right. Interesting guy who's popping this way, who I haven't seen in a while, Daniel Summerhays, who kind of fell off the radar forever. I'm like, I haven't seen that. But, like, he's down there at 7,000, and I was trying to figure out why. So the course history is, like, middling. It's a couple made cuts. What has he done recently? Like, I'm sure he was, like, struggling in the beginning in, like, February. But his last 3, it's like a 23, a 14, and a 13. I don't know. If you believe in recent form, I just think, and he hasn't changed in price enough. And, like, you coast, like, if you like 3 top 20 finishes and your price doesn't budge from, like, 7,000, I don't know. It seems like a little bit of a cheap, dare I say, maybe even a good futures bet for, like, a top 10 finish or something. So I think 7,000 is not enough for him. It's again, a kind of middling course history, but I don't know. He's hot. So, and then let's see. The last 2 guys kind of in the same, like, fun range. Harris English is still there. I kind of liked him last week. He hasn't budged much in price. And then the last guy who I'm kind of iffy on, Cameron Tringale. He has pretty bad course history. Like, not even bad, but just like there's not a whole lot of upside. Made the cut 4 to 5 times, but never posted higher than a 40th. His recent form kind of still pretty. He's making cuts recently, so depending on if you don't think bad course history matters that much and only leap, I could see him being a cheap flyer. So those are my guys.
Colin, 7-3 right at Harris English. Your boy had redemption last week, and it fits the course. Chez.
Yeah, I mean he's there. Like, I think, like, I think he did what he said in the box last week. His price is pretty much the same. Like, yeah.
You're okay with Chez?
Chez is always. I was kind of sad Chez isn't popping higher than he was. I think he's kind of up there. He has middling course history. Like, I don't know. I just slightly prefer those other guys at a cheaper price. But yeah, I'm fine with Chez.
Yeah, I hear you. Pete, all right, who's your middle tier guys?
I mean, Colin just named, like, everybody. I mean, like, come on. Like, what am I supposed to do?
We switch up every week.
Bill Haas is right there. I was going to mention Chez, and then you bring him up. I mean, I have no content now. I mean, Bill Haas is the only other guy who's rating somewhat well. I probably won't have much of him just because of his price. I'll take other guys below him, like Ryan Palmer, Colton Nost. I'll definitely take over him. So that's the gist of it. I mean, Danny Leash, I mentioned. I mean, last week he's a member at the course and he crushed it. I definitely think that's something we really gotta get a slider for the guys who are members at these courses, Colin.
No, it's a thing worth looking into for sure.
I have no idea how to even come close to gathering that data. I think that's just something we'll have to learn over time. But
sounds like we need an intern program. Yeah. All right, sounds good.
Yeah, so I'm somewhat joking, but I do think it matters a good bit. So, yeah, that's it for the mid-tier. I do get to name a couple of fun guys in the lower tier, so that's going to be nice.
All right, well, go right to it, Pete.
All right, well, the number 1 guy in my model is Emiliano Grillo. I'm going back to the well.
Oh, you know I'll never turn my
I'm going back to the well with him. Another guy who's rating well that disappointed me last week, but now he's back in that price range I like is Lucas Glover. I still don't know. I mean, he's about as bad as Keegan Bradley at putting, so I don't know. I'm really struggling to take guys who just can't putt. So we'll see if I take him. And then one guy I have a question on. He's the second highest guy overall in my model, and that's Kramer Hickrock. And I think that's just because of his driving accuracy and greens and regulation. But I don't know what's going on with him. Kramer Hickrock, he looks terrible. He's ranking.
Yeah, that seems like he's not even. He's on the basement of mine. I got to. Okay.
There's something clear. I mean, look, if you look at his results, it's egregious. Like he's miscut withdrawn. He's playing like donkey tournaments. I mean, he looks like a fool.
Yeah, that's like from whatever's going on. Like, yeah, it's something weird and glitchy, and I don't believe those results in the slightest. Yep, throw them out.
I bring him out because I've said this about other guys in the past, and then they just go on to get like top fives. I can't remember who specifically, Cheka, whatever that guy. He ranked super high, just dismissed it, and it's happened like 3 or 4 times where I just see these guys who are ranked really high. I'm like, okay, these are easy guys to X out, and then they crush that week. I don't think it's going to happen here with Hickok.
Yeah, this is way too sparse of a sample size, and the data.
Hashtag trust the model.
Yeah.
No,
I'd be okay with them throwing him out too. Yes, everybody that you mentioned, just fine. I mean, Glover and Griot are definitely there for sure. They're accuracy guys. Scott Piercy's decently high again. He was kind of tilting too because of a day 2 collapse. Bradley's there, but never again. I don't care.
Literally never again with Keegan. I'm telling you, do not do it. My friend Bird, he was laughing the whole time that I had him. He was just like, can't like send me emojis, all this stuff. Like, can't believe you're playing Keegan. Like, you're gonna burn. And started off a little hot. I didn't say anything. I didn't even jinx it. I never was cocky with Keegan. Just trying to get him through the cut. I watched the entire Friday round. And, sorry, I'm going on a lot of rants on this.
No, this is fine. We're just like it's a Keegan. Is like we can't even mention him now on the podcast. We're not even consider him. Other super value guys in here. I seem to be mentioning these guys in the sub 6K range every week. Hudson Swafford and Johnson Wagner. This week, I don't feel bad about them popping again because their price hasn't changed, but they both had top 30 finishes this past week. Like, your price doesn't change. You're a low ball guy and you pop a top 30. Like, by definition, yes, you get more valuable. So, they're decent GPP plays, I think, if you really need to roster Spieth. So,
all right. Okay. Well, let's. I guess we'll end it there. Let's end with a pick. Who's winning the tournament, Colin?
I don't know. I want to go on superstition here. Patrick Reed, since I'm touting him earlier, he's due. I just want to be coached off of your coattails on that one.
Yeah. Well, there's another golf tout out there. I think it's Jeff Feinberg who just he bets Reed every week, and I listen to his stuff. And he's all in again, all in on the Reed bandwagon. So I like that call. Maybe that's just getting maybe I'm taking that in too much. But I from watching him. He's right there, and he's definitely a better golfer than I think the public perception is on him. So, like him a lot. I'm going to take another guy to win. It's Colt Knost. That's what I'm going to take.
Not bad. I mean, I wouldn't even feel bad. I feel like I was on that train pretty early before everyone else was, and I'd love to see it validated.
I like it. Colin, you want to be inside baseball-y and pick a Euro Tour winner this week? Just off the top of your head.
Ooh, that's a good one. All right. Who do I know? That's let me pull that up. Who's good. No, I gotta say, yeah, I gotta go with the guy I'm excited on, Bradley Dredge.
Bradley Dredge, what a
Euro. The most Euro name ever. I feel like, he's got a fishing boat on the Thames or something, and just yeah.
I like it. Okay, good stuff. Yeah, well, we're obviously excited for Euro Tour. Again, we'll have a more expanded segment on that next week. So tune into the podcast. You don't have to subscribe to multiple podcasts or anything like that. We're going to add it to this. So it might be a little longer, but we'll figure out ways to cut it up so you can sort of digest whatever sort of segments you want. But be on the lookout for that. We'll have some content. Colin's article on course history is out today. Pete's got a video coming tomorrow about his model for the DEAN DeLuca, all sorts of stuff. Thanks for listening. Pete, Colin, thanks. We'll talk to you guys next week.